This is Pamela Smythe from the University of Waterloo. I'm one of the hosts of Beyond the Bulletin, the podcast of internal communications at the university. We bring you news and reviews from the U-Waterloo community. Please spread the word that we're on SoundCloud.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And now the interview from episode 166 of Beyond the Bulletin, originally broadcast on December 15th, 2023. It was 60 years ago that Conrad Grebel University College, one of the affiliated and federated institutions of Waterloo, or AFU, taught its first courses. Back then, there were 2 courses and 1 professor. Much has changed since those early days, but as Grebel's president Marcus Shantz tells us, some has stayed the same. Welcome to the podcast, Marcus.
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations to you and everybody at Grebel on your 60th anniversary.
It's a big year. Thank you for thinking of us.
What would you say is the guiding principle of Conrad Grebel University College, and has it changed in the 60 years?
I would say that one is curiosity. So I think curiosity comes naturally from being a small part of a big university. And I think that was there from the beginning. I think from the beginning, the founders recognized that there was an opportunity here, being part of a university, to reach beyond Grebel's founding communities and interact with a bigger world and engage with that world. So I've become fond of quoting Grebel's founding president, and people who work here have heard this enough times, but it'll be new to you. His name was Winfield Fretz, and he said right at the start of the college, and this is a direct quote, "I was not interested in creating a separate school, a non-socializing, non-interacting school, an isolated academic community, as though we had the truth and were somehow going to reveal this to others. We were learning as well as teaching." So that was at the end of his quote. That was his original vision, and I think we've leaned into that really well over the last 60 years, and I think you have to be curious. You need curiosity to drive that. Yeah, so I also mentioned community, and I think that's another thread that's tied the college together. We've always worked at building community in our residence and in our classrooms. You could say that we have academic interests in community. So, I mean, Mennonite history, Mennonite studies, that's a study of a particular community. Peace and conflict studies is generally the study of conflict and peace within communities and between communities. And music is all about, or often about, creating community through performance and participation. So we're interested in building community, we're interested in studying community, and we're interested in how different communities connect and intersect and interact together.
Grebel was founded by members of the Mennonite community.
That's right.
How connected is Grebel still to the Mennonite community?
Formally, we're still, the Mennonite Church of Eastern Canada still has a governance role on our board of governors. Many, but not all, of our faculty are Mennonite. Many, but not all, of our staff are Mennonite. And there's still a percentage of Mennonite students in the college. But we've always been open to all kinds of different people.
So Grebel's always been affiliated with the University of Waterloo ever since the beginning. Can you describe the relationship?
Yeah, it's an unusual relationship. At least it was for Mennonites, because the first thing that was strange is that Grebel began when the university approached local Mennonite groups and invited them to start a college. It wasn't that we were out wanting to start a college. We were invited by the university. And that was strange for Mennonites. Catholics, Anglicans, the United Church of Canada, they all have a long history of being involved in higher education in Canada, but Mennonites didn't. That's not to say that Mennonites didn't have colleges. There's about maybe a dozen Mennonite-related colleges and universities in North America, but they're all standalone institutions. None of them are integrated into a bigger university. So from Grebel's perspective, it's been a great relationship.
So students at Grebel receive a degree from the University of Waterloo, except in the case of your graduate theology program. Is that right?
Theological studies is actually a conjoint program. Graduates have both Grebel and University of Waterloo on their degrees.
Okay.
But yeah, you're right.
But Grebel does offer courses, for example, religious studies, history, sociology, which are not unique to Grebel, but some of the programs are. So you talked a bit about some of the programs that set you apart, but let's delve a bit deeper into it. What are the flagship programs at Grebel?
If I start calling programs flagships, I'll get emails. We talk about in terms of shared and unshared disciplines. So an unshared discipline is one where we do all the teaching. We sort of own it, although I don't like that. We're the home of it exclusively. And shared disciplines are like history or religious studies or sociology, where our faculty teach, but there's a university department and there's other university faculty and other faculty from the other AFU that are part of that. So the unshared programs, the programs that we're the home to, are the music program and the peace and conflict studies in terms of undergrad. They both offer majors and other plans for undergraduate students. And PAX also offers a master's degree. For the rest of the undergraduate programs, our history teaching is mostly in early modern European history with a focus on the Reformation. So that relates to Mennonite origins, but it also is a study of what happened generally in that period. And we're also part of the religious studies department, which is really a partnership among the 4 AFU and the university itself.
Why do you offer those specific unshared disciplines?
I think everything we teach grew from sort of the original interests of our founders and sort of the traditional interests of the Mennonite community. So music features prominently in the Mennonite community that's here in Ontario. Peace and conflict studies, Mennonites were a pacifist church, but we don't teach these things from a sectarian perspective. So as I said before, we're curious. We're learning as well as teaching. So while it started with those interests, it's moved beyond the perspective of the founders for sure. Music, I'll just say music is actually our largest program in terms of enrollments. And there we have performance ensembles, choirs, orchestras, and bands. We teach music theory and we teach musicology. And what's interesting there is that most of our students aren't from arts. We have, or when I counted it, we have around 900 math and computer enrollments in music and around 400 engineers, just to name a couple of faculties. So it's some service teaching that we do for the university that way, and we feel good about that.
How is Grebel funded?
About 60% of our revenue would come from funding agreements that we have with the university. So we teach undergraduate courses in arts, and we have the graduate programs, and we have agreements that provide for us to be compensated for that teaching through the university. And then residence fees generate around 20%. 10% of our operating income comes from donations and endowments. And then the rest is from other sources like rentals. So we try to raise about $2 million a year in donations, both for operations and for capital. And so that's helped us to keep mostly debt-free, and we really benefit from a generous group of supporters out there in the community.
Well, several post-secondary institutions in Ontario are reporting considerable deficits, including Waterloo at about $15 million. I was looking at Grebel's financial statements. The one I saw was 2021-2022, and it stated that there's a deficiency of less than $500,000. What do you think of the Blue Panel's recommendation, specifically that the provincial government increase funding by 10% immediately and then increase by inflation or 2% for the next 3 years?
For the financial statement that we had, part of that is going to be some unusual things like roof repairs and things that were unique to that year that the accountants say we have to charge to operations. So there's a bit of that going on. But yeah, we are finding it more and more challenging to break even on the year. That's been going on for the last 4 or 5 years. The Blue Ribbon Panel gave a really great report. It's a good set of recommendations. The people on that panel were the government's appointees. So all I can say is I hope that the government takes the advice seriously and acts on it. Every year of this tuition freeze and the grant freeze, it just gets a little harder to make things work. And at a certain point, it becomes a crisis. So they need to act soon.
Not only are you president of Conrad Grebel University College, but you're also an alum. What is the student experience like at Grebel, and maybe what was yours like?
A lot of things have stayed the same. There have been a bunch of changes, but we try to create an environment in the residence where community can happen naturally. So we don't, as administrators, don't spend a lot of time sort of dictating what happens. We just try to create an opportunity for students to do it themselves. So, and one thing we do that's a little different from many other residences is that over half of our residents, we have a traditional dorm, and then we also have some apartments, but over half of them are upper year students, second, third, fourth, fifth year. And what that does is it enables traditions, culture to be passed down. It enables upper year students to be mentors for younger people, and a lot of the students. The student council often takes care of needs and anticipates things before we even have to act. So, I mean, one thing I was surprised by when I came here as president is they were doing student council elections, and they said one of the positions they were electing for was the co-op rep. And so I asked, well, what is that? And they said, well, a few years back, they realized that first year co-op students found it all a bit daunting, even though there's lots of supports on main campus. And so the student council just said, we're going to get an upper year student, and their job is going to be the co-op rep, and they're going to do little seminars and a bit of coaching, and there'll be a resource in case students have questions about co-op. Another thing that just happened last year was we've had a growing number of international students in the residence. We've always had international students. And very naturally and very quickly, the student council said, well, we need an international student rep because they have a particular set of interests and concerns. And so that's the kind of ethos that we have here. And it's also fun things like a musical. Every 2 years, the students produce a full-on Broadway musical that actually is pretty good. It's a good performance every year. So it's those kinds of things that happen at Grebel.
Well, it's a big anniversary year, as we said, 60. Let's talk about some of the milestones along the way. What are some of the major events or changes that have occurred that you think are key to Grebel's identity now?
I mean, one of the big changes, I think, was just the growth of the academic program. My impression is that they originally envisioned the college mostly as a residence that did a bit of teaching. But there was this expansion of the arts faculty through the 70s and 80s that Grebel was part of. So the addition of the music program, the addition of peace and conflict studies, expanding teaching and religious studies, I think was a really big change in the college and a change in the vision of what was originally visioned. I think there have been big changes in the social and religious context. So I think the assumption at the beginning was that this place was primarily for Mennonite students, but now we're much more diverse. And with that, we're figuring out how to be a place of belonging for a diverse community, a community that's much more diverse than was originally envisioned. And another thing I would add more recently is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and those findings and how that landed here. So Mennonites were the first settlers of European origin in Waterloo Region, going back to like 1804, I think. And the TRC and the recommendations and the reflection that happened around that, I think in us here at Grebel, we felt a particular obligation to come to terms with our past and our relationships with Indigenous communities because of that historic connection. And so we've been working on that in different ways. A couple of years ago, we had a an Indigenous Mennonite Encounters conference that was a few really meaningful days here at the college. And we've had good relationships with people like Jean Becker and the people at Waterloo Indigenous Student Center. We've just continued to try to work at that. And I think that's going to be an ongoing thing that we do.
You have some really important partnerships that you've created and you've maintained throughout the years. Let's talk about those and why you even have them. I mean,
the biggest partner is the university itself. In terms of the partnerships we'd have in the community itself, we have, through the Peace and Conflict Studies program in particular, there are a few programs that and organizations that grew out of the college, including Project Plowshares, which has been around since the 70s. It's a organization that researches the arms trade in Canada and also does other kinds of peace research. And so they're an affiliate of ours. They have offices on the 4th floor, and they bring a lot of depth and dimension to what we do. So there's some other examples I could give of organizations like that we're part of, NGOs, social service agencies, and so forth in the community.
But in the case of, say, Project Plowshares, how do they add this depth to what you do?
Very practically, people who work at Project Plowshares are regular adjuncts in our courses, so they'll teach in their area of expertise. We have students who will do internships in Project Plowshares and in some other organizations that we have. And they also just connect us to activities that we otherwise wouldn't be part of. A few years ago, we had the real honor of nominating Setsuko Thurlow, who is part of Project Plowshares, but also, and Plowshares itself was part of the larger coalition that got the UN to pass the treaty banning nuclear weapons. And she got an honorary doctorate here through the connection to the college and through her connection to Project Plowshares and through Plowshares' connection to that larger organization. So that was a pretty meaningful conferral that enriches the whole university, right? I saw lots of different students after that convocation coming up and wanting to meet her and wanting to talk to her about her life. So it's that kind of thing that can happen.
What is coming up for Grebel? What are the goals that you have?
Yeah, how do you talk about goals in a time when everything seems to be, shrinking, when the resources are shrinking? Even though we're at a university that trumpets innovation and change, and I realize that things are always changing, I bring sort of a conservationist approach to my work at Grebel. So I look at what's here, and I see a lot of what here is good. It's stuff we've already gotten right. The community, our approach to teaching, the care we bring to the teaching, the quality of the relationships we've been able to develop over time. And so I would say that not everything needs to change. And in fact, sustaining what's here in an environment where, again, resources are shrinking, et cetera, is an enormous amount of work. And it's enormously ambitious just to keep it fresh and to keep what's here vibrant and green and growing. And so that's my ambition. It's to be a good steward so that the place is here for future generations, and so that future generations can have exactly the same experience, not exactly, but a similar experience to what I had.
That sounds great, Marcus. Thanks for looking back with me. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for the time. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you for listening to this interview from the Beyond the Bulletin podcast from the University of Waterloo. You will find our archive of full episodes on the University of Waterloo website. Select interviews are on the university's YouTube channel. Just look for our playlist there. Please join Brandon Sweet and me for new episodes, and don't forget to tell your Waterloo connections about us.